Global entities have arisen from previous superpowers to gain independence, but in the case of the majority of those countries, including South Africa, Israel, and Iran, that garnered freedom has led to political instability and economic retardation. This failure to stabilize has been due to a lack of foresight on the effects that their freedom had on their social infrastructure, especially their relations with their former parent countries. This created a means of ethnic and social hierarchy, which led to internal conflicts within the governing bodies. This hierarchy has been a cause of religious divisions, such as in Israel and Iran, but also racial oppression, as in South Africa and their conflict within apartheid. In the case of South Africa, their independence led to racial inequality between the predominantly black African community and the Dutch minority, with the Dutch at the lead. After settling in South Africa due to religious means, the Dutch immediately saw the native Zulu tribes as barbarous heathens, unfit to have any means of operation within a moral society such as theirs. This blatant racism continued on after the Boer Wars, in which the British won control over African gold reserves, but allowed the Dutch to retain political power over the black majority. This led to the establishment of widespread segregation. This policy soon led to the creation of apartheid after South African independence in 1931, which inevitably divided the white minority into the upper-class areas and positions and the Africans into the homelands or slums. As a result, the African community consolidated into the African National Congress to destroy apartheid and reintegrate themselves into power. This was an initially non-violent organization led by Nelson Mandela and run to a similar fashion to that of Mahatma Gandhi. The National Congress eventually supported guerrilla warfare after the Sharpeville massacre, in which 67 protesters fell by gunfire. Nelson Mandela was arrested, but his sentencing as well as the massacre led to increased social unrest in South Africa. Mandela was eventually released, apartheid was abolished, and he was later elected president during the first open election in South African history. Despite the seemingly quaint outcome, the road to that resolution was riddled with poverty and racism, differing byproducts of the social hierarchy created through Russian independence.
Iran and Israel also applied a social hierarchy, except it pertained to the religious aspect of their societies, as opposed to racial oppression. In 1925, Reza Shah Pahlavi came to power in Iran and began to modernize it. He distributed the Muslim clerics' lands and secularized certain tenets of Islamic law. He gave women a means of higher equality, such as access to higher education and job opportunities, as well as the right to vote. Furthermore, he allowed them to wear Western clothing, clashing directly upon the traditional garb of Muslim heritage. This caused anger among the fundamentalist sects of Iran, causing a schism between a once seemingly united front. They argued to make the tenets of Islam the written law. Others believed that Iran should reform to a more democratic, westernized means of operation. This sense of conflict over religious identity heightened after the death of Ayatollah Khomeini in 1989, creating a wedge between Islamic fundamentalist clerics and those in favor of reform and westernization. This has led to an internal division between the Muslim majority, creating a vice on the stability of the country, leading it into stagnancy and fluctuating development.
Israel followed in a similar fashion, as the Jews discriminated against the remaining Muslim occupants. This has been going on since the split of the original Palestine in 1948. The Jews refused to give rights to the Muslims due to the fact that they refused to emigrate during the split of Palestine. This went as far as tearing down homes of the original Palestinians, instilling a means of terrorist design in the Israeli control over the Muslims as a whole. In 1956, Arab Israelis were returning to their village where they were gunned down by a platoon from the Israel Border Control. 48 Arabs were killed. This event was known as the Kafr Qasim massacre. Whether the government deliberately did not inform the villagers of a curfew or a result of the socio-religious hierarchies that were formed in Israel, this is a very important event in the foundation of Israel's social hierarchy, in which the Jews take precedency over the Muslim population due to the religious differences.
The internal divisions within all three of the countries disintegrated any means of stability that entered into discussion. By allowing outside factors such as racial or religious bigotry to enter into a social and thus political realm, Iran, Israel, and South Africa stagnated any means of integration into the First World, as internal divisions led to social outcry, which in turn led to massacre by the challenged political entities upon the opposing sides. This led to both funding and casualties being tied up in local affairs, allowing countries such as the US and Great Britain the opportunity to monopolize and subsidize those areas for their own means of expansion. Independence was obviously the short-term victory for all three countries, but the wholly negative implications of unrealized freedoms led them like lambs to the slaughter. as they had no means of long-term comprehension of what was to come. Freedom without stability is nothing more than a means for division and outside capitalization.